What is African storytelling?
I went to Ghana last year in November, and I met these wonderful people from there, South Africa, Uganda, Rwanda, Nigeria, and Ghana, of course, and also my colleagues from the other film schools in Germany. And we had a very, very good meeting.
So the Film School Network came up with the idea to dedicate a whole conference to talk about storytelling.
And then I said, summer school, this is my thing. I want to do the summer school in Babelsberg. And then I pitched it and I said, please, people, in September we'll meet in Babelsberg.
It's an engagement of the continent of Africa, film schools on the continent of Africa, with one country in Europe, which is Germany. And so I wonder how that really works out.
But if we view this question of African storytelling through this intersectional politics, what might stories reveal in terms of their condition?
Normally African film festivals or African sections in film festivals, and what you end up talking about in these places are very often very technical, distribution platforms for film funding, and in the background of this, or the premise of this, is obviously because our stories are important, because we are storytellers and we have things to say, but that becomes an invisible premise.
And it's time freed for us to not think about African storytelling as a prescriptive project, but rather as a project in which we search for different strategies, to search for different aesthetic inquiries, and to perhaps think about strategies that challenge the very canonization of African cinema.
And I think in cinema there is no passport.
Und das ist ja indirekt gesehen sozusagen auch ein Plädoyer dafür, zusammenzufinden und Brücken zu bauen. Was kann es dafür Besseres geben als Geschichten? Aber dieses tiefergreifende Erleben von Zusammenhängen ist für mich, der ich, wie gesagt, als Erzähler sehr traditionell sozialisiert wurde, ist das für mich das A und O. Also es ist nicht leicht zu haben.
There is a way in which Black experience is absolutely living inside the experience of observing whiteness all the time.
If a Nigerian went and said, I want to make a film in Berlin or New York about a white family, I think it would be a bit presumptuous.
There is a way in which the world views cinema from the African continent.
There are moments when there is a lot of presumption, and presumptuous storytelling can be very dangerous.
Everyone has a right, to make a story of what he or she thinks that this is the story. But you shouldn't feel or say this is authentic African.
Authenticity speaks about kind of the blind spots in hegemonic representations.
It's important that if you want to live in a community and talk about it fully, then travel, visit.
Und da gibt es zwei Dinge, Arbeit und Liebe. Also das sind immer so die entscheidenden Dinge, über die man etwas überhaupt kennenlernt, glaube ich. Und wo man dann beginnt, den Blick des Touristen oder auf jeden Fall den Blick des Fremden zu verlieren.
The weight of history is so heavy on our shoulders when we take on these subjects, but there must be ways to still be able to act and think and tell stories, even though they will always be flawed.
Most stories we get to hear from the African continent are still told by Germans or other white European people. And I think there's the importance for those stories to be told by people from the continent, people from the countries that the stories are from.
It's also important for me to understand what the greater context is for African storytelling within our context, and how I can translate what I receive here to the people who receive our trainings.
The power relationships in the real world that are informing these categories of who can make a film that carries whose consciousness.
The national identity does not make space for that, for the celebration of a multitude of identities and different voices, languages, cultures, etc. How do you locate the European in you, the Africanist in you? I have everything in a box, like with this German thing, we figured it out, Africa, cinema, da-da-da. I think they're lying. I don't think that's the case. You know, I think we're schizophrenic.
There is the idea of ownership, African storytelling, owning something. So there's an underlying collective conscience that's also present, and we live in this duality as storytellers.
I'm here to meet others, to meet other experiences and exchange.
I'm here to attend this African film gathering, like workshop, to be together and meet filmmakers from different countries in Africa.
I'm based in Namibia, and we work often in isolation, and for different reasons are very cut off from the rest of the African continent and the rest of the world. So coming here gives us an opportunity to build bridges with each other and relate and share some of the things we're doing.
It's been super inspiring and very affirmative space, so very people kind of really like supporting each other and kind of sharing ideas, and very collegial, and yeah, it's been a great time.
I've in the past learned that it could become a little bit too dusty, where people are mostly sharing anecdotes, and this time I found it one of the most constructive weeks that I've participated in, to be honest. So.
This is Africa calling. That's how we learn. That's how we learn. I can't stop this feeling. I want to be.
In filmmaking, there's these unintentional delays that in the long run can actually lead to a more well-rounded film in terms of taking like a longer time to do it. And also you're adding all these experiences to the film, and that the process itself is as much as part of what you see on screen.
It's about being conscious about how you're just not using what's been given to you, but rather translating it into your own gaze, into your own subjectivity as a filmmaker.
So I think this question about intention and gaze is so conditional on the context of the material, and sort of the expression I'm interested in thinking about is how do you unlearn the intention of those images?
It's becoming a bit more frequent, but it's quite rare that as filmmakers that work on the continent, both as practitioners of filmmaking and people that teach filmmaking, get to come together in one space and talk about the craft, the art, the things that worry us, and the work that we make, even just to get to see the work that we make and what it means going forward and the things to look out for.
Very interested in this idea of sharing approaches to storytelling, and particularly African storytelling, and how we can use these exchanges to develop new tools for teaching.
For me, I was even saying that the diversity alone even makes it difficult for me to even teach, because where I come from, just alone, after every 5 miles or something, it's a different language, a different culture, you know, and we're in the same country.
Here, all the institutions understand the importance of storytelling in nation building, in identity formation, in social cohesion. But on the continent of Africa, we have a completely different situation. So what I'm wondering is how the good things that are happening here are actually going to feed back.
must be absolutely wonderful to be young and dangerous anywhere in the world right now, because you have an opportunity to make great stories.
I think exchanges and collaborations are really important, and I think they're also fun. I would wish that actually that we have more, and that we have the space for greater experimentation with these ideas, and that actually we get to make more things together.
Storytelling is not just only African or German or Europeans, but it's universal. We have the same aspirations, the same dreams, the same challenges, and at the end of the day we all want the same thing anyway. So, and storytelling is a very good tool to showcase that.
But sometimes we also risk to get stuck in those legends about the fathers of cinema from 50 years ago, without asking questions, but where were the mothers of African cinema from 45 years ago, and what happened, who did not tell stories during this time, and maybe also leave those fathers to rest and actually start to talk about African cinemas and African image making and storytelling in completely new and dynamic ways.
All of us have realized that it's layered, that the understanding it's different from place to place as to what African story really is.
All of us having to think differently about how we perceive things and what we thought were givens, taken for granted. So it's quite transformative, I think.
Or maybe a certain definition that will come to kind of encapsulate all that we're thinking in one statement, African story.
The challenge, I think, in our program in the summer school is to think about what implications it has to what we take back in the classroom.
For teaching and learning to happen, the teacher who is the storyteller has to get the approval of learners. Without learners who are willing to actively engage as opposed to just receiving knowledge, teaching and learning cannot happen. And the way this is done is that the storyteller starts by saying, once upon a time, and the listeners reply,
Os.
Again.
Os.
One more time.
Os.
So I thought we should start now and do that in order for this story to start. So.
Kwasuka-sukela. Wonderful.